3 years ago, Game Rant and other online news sources would report that Sega had cautiously unveiled its ambitious plans to embark on the development of what they dubbed a super game, a big major project which they said would span a comprehensive 5-year timeline. With this initial announcement, scant details were disclosed regarding the nature, components, or overarching design of this mysterious project. But the prevailing sentiment was that this venture would serve as a pivotal milestone in the strategic revitalization of the company's esteemed classic intellectual properties. Fast forward a few more years and we are now aware that Sega do indeed plan to revive many of their old IPs, but none of these interesting endeavours relate to Sega's so-called super game that was apparently in development. So this raises the questions: what happened to this intriguing project, and why has no Sega mega project surfaced on our home consoles? Is it simply a case of such a title still being baked in the oven? Let's find out. Hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here. This is everything we know about Sega's missing super game. Yeah. When it comes to companies who spend the big bucks on creating the most expensive and elaborate to produce titles in gaming, in modern day Sega aren't likely to be the first entity that springs to mind, especially when companies like Rockstar are pumping astronomical resources into projects that have taken years and years, such as GTA 6 for example. However, if we rewind the clock to the 90s, it was Sega who had produced the most expensive game ever made. The Shenmue project cost a whopping $70 million, but although this was the most detailed and immersive title we had ever seen from them back then, unfortunately this Dreamcast project failed to return the profits Sega had hoped for. Fast forward a few decades into this cutthroat new century, more money is being invested into games than ever before, with the bar being set higher and higher with regards to what is considered a super project. In a world where mergers upon mergers happen, where Microsoft proposes an all-digital future, and where the talk of the town is how Spider-Man 2 didn't win awards at the Game Awards, there is no doubt that despite high-budget games being more prevalent than ever, they are also even more of a risk to make. For example, Starfield cost a significant amount of money to create, and it has effectively become a neutral blip on the radar of modern gaming. So let's discuss Sega's recent foray into the world of so-called super games. When it comes to the term super game, by the way, this isn't a term I chose to just pull out of thin air to produce a juicy title for a video with, but a term Sega have been using themselves. Tweaktown.com highlight that what Sega is describing is kind of a spin on the live service / games as a service model, but there's some criteria. By Sega's logic, to qualify as a super game, a title will target $1 billion in lifetime revenues, an ambitious target that usually takes publishers years to achieve. However, monsters in the gaming industry such as Activision have been known to achieve this. So let's talk about a Sega project that fits this exact mold. Originally pitched internally as Project Keaton in 2017, presumably named after the Batman that would also co-star in the coincidentally cancelled Batgirl film, Creative Assembly would get the green light after the relative critical success of their Alien Isolation title. With the studio consistently pumping out titles for parent company Sega for over 2 decades by this point, the developers would pitch a new game as a hero-based multiplayer extraction shooter, encouraging players to fight in zero-G combat scenarios, steal epic merch from billionaires who frequently took the form of a Sonic the Hedgehog figurine, escape with a booty, and your life in tow. This would all be against a rather interesting background for a game, showing us a preview of a world that will sadly never be. This game would receive its own narrative, featuring a big technology company called Clout, who figures out how to mess with gravity. This allows them to lead and control people escaping from Earth to space. They use this cool tech to quickly make Mars into a fancy place where rich people stash their money to avoid taxes. It's like a big playground for the super rich, essentially a future as dreamed about by Elon Musk. Later on, back on Earth, one of the gravity gadgets breaks. This causes a huge disaster that destroys the planet in just a few weeks. They call this mess the Crack. Earth's leaders scramble to save whoever they can, stealing spaceships to get people out, but only a small group makes it out in time. These survivors end up living in floating slums called the Taint. It's a pretty rough life. 3 million folks who lost everything, now stuck doing lousy jobs as space miners in exchange for scraps from Mars. Meanwhile, life is peachy on Mars, except for one thing. People are feeling a bit purposeless. Clout's big idea to fix this problem is to ditch things like politics, art and religion and instead focus on the brand. Now your worth is all about owning rare stuff instead of achieving things, and the rarest, most valuable items are the things left behind on broke Earth. Cool clothes, gadgets and more just waiting to be found, so Clout sends these huge ships called plunder ships back to Earth to grab these treasures for the folks on the Red Planet. As expected though, not everyone in the Taint is happy with this dystopian setup. Some refuse to accept the fate that Clout handed them. They don't want to settle for scraps or let Mars rich folks get away with it. These rebels start raiding the plunder ships, stealing back treasures, reclaiming the past, and giving a big middle finger to the so-called better people on Mars. These unexpected rebels are called Hyenas, a name shared with the title of this Sega project itself. Of course, with Elon Musk's grand plans for Mars and self-visioning himself as a meme lord, he would deem the impoverished millions that survive outside of the wreckage of Earth as living in the Taint. Speaking of which, if you're unaware of what Taint is, look it up on Urban Dictionary, but Taint Earth, Taint Mars in this context. In this game, players could check out one map, a pair of retail spaces explicitly dedicated to Earth's 1980s, the best decade and the birth of humanity's greatest hero, me. While sadly I am not in this game, the title does have its own heroes and legends pitched, with full bios on the site, but the highlights include Hero Key, a Sonic fanboy decked out in a homemade costume, complete with plushies and Mega Drive armour. In addition to him we have Commander Wright, an idealistic but sarcastic lover of space exploration. The pro who goes into battle wearing a prison jumpsuit and a Richard Nixon mask, he definitely could be a crook. Prima, as in prima donna, is a tattooed ballerina presumed to be crazy by many and more. There is a fair amount of different characters featured. At the time of this video, you can actually visit the website for this game at playhyenas.com, but sadly this title that Sega had pumped a great deal of time and money into seems like it will never see a commercial release. When visiting the game's website, it almost feels as if time has frozen for this failed franchise. The page encourages users to join the PC closed beta, and still has a Twitter link, now X, with the last post from the developers going as follows. The Hyenas PC closed beta has drawn to a close, and we have to thank you all for making it a rousing success. A galaxy's worth of players swarmed the plunder ships and our servers to experience a taste of what Hyenas has to offer: merch, mirths and zero-G madness. Giving players a hands-on with the game is exciting enough, and obviously a massive benefit when running a closed beta. But it also gives us a wealth of invaluable information as we continue to develop Hyenas. We got so much great info from the PC closed beta, testing out game elements, studying player habits, and discovering and squashing bugs. As a result of all of you playing so many matches, we've been able to gather a ton of useful data, which will help us improve the game as we move forward. As you'll know if you played the PC closed beta, zero-G movement and combat is a huge part of Hyenas, and a key skill to master if you want to win games. The total distance travelled in zero-G by our players was over 105 million meters. That's about 2.5 times around the Earth, which we have on good authority is actually further than a marathon. That's a long way. We also want to shout out the community. The love and the effort you've already put into Hyenas is humbling. A game is nothing without players after all. We literally couldn't do it without you. Some of you even went the extra mile and strove for those world firsts. Congrats to the following. So what's next? We can't announce anything just yet, but rest assured that there is plenty more Hyenas heading your way, with a plunder ship's worth of updates and improvements based on your feedback. Keep an eye on our socials or here on the site for information as it drops. Thanks again to everyone who took part in the Hyenas PC closed beta, whether it was for one match of Plunder Riot or hundreds. We'll see you all again soon. Ironically, they would not actually see us again. But if you had any questions about why, well then screw you, as the frequently asked questions section has been emptied out. So this probably has you asking then, what happened to this promising title? Well, of the people that played the open betas, the Escapist would comment, despite the eye-catching marketing campaign and robust production values on display, plus Creative Assembly's extensive experience, Hyenas isn't exactly making a splash online, not even after a generous closed beta that, at the very least, feels very polished. I was lucky enough to get into it and give the game a whirl for 3 hours or so. Sadly, I came out really confused and feeling pessimistic about its chances when Sega finally decides to let it out in the wild. While many of my doubts can be linked to my thoughts on the BR and extraction subgenres and where they are at the moment, the game itself also exhibits several problems that are hard to fix this late into the process. A common sentiment among closed beta players, and one I must echo, is that Hyenas simply feels way too cynical and market tested to hell and back. Sega would even fully admit that in the investors meeting they were still sorting out how the game would be run. While initially denying a free-to-play model, Sega wouldn't explicitly rule it out when pressed at a later date by the media in August 2023. 1 month later, they would make the surprising announcement that yes, Hyenas would just outright be cancelled. A press release would simply state, "In response to the lower profitability of the European region, we have reviewed the title portfolio of each development base in Europe, and the resulting action will be to cancel Hyenas and some unannounced titles under development. Accordingly, we will implement a write-down of work in progress for titles under development." At one point in time, it seemed that Hyenas was envisioned as a dynamic and expansive game that was intended to serve as a vibrant hub reminiscent of the gaming phenomenon Fortnite. Rather regrettably for some, Sega has taken the unexpected and disheartening decision to cancel the intriguing Hyenas project. What you might not necessarily realise though is that this move is not an isolated one, as Sega is concurrently implementing a reduction in scope across several projects within its European subsidiaries. The repercussions of these strategic adjustments are already taking a toll on Sega's financial landscape. In light of the cancellations, Sega anticipates a substantial loss, projecting a financial deficit of approximately $95 million for the fiscal year concluded in March 2024. This could perhaps shed some new light on why Sega seem to be leaning towards much cheaper to produce nostalgia-driven projects as of late. They are referring to the upcoming era for the brand as the so-called power surge, when the reality is the company is losing both power and money, meaning there is more likely to be a power cut. With regards to Hyenas though, let me ask you, do you mourn the loss of this never-to-be super game, or do you think it would have been more modern rubbish you wouldn't have had any interest in playing anyway? Comment below which direction you think Sega should be going in, then subscribe and check out my recent upload on what we know about the Power Surge games. Yeah, cheerio.